Welcome, welcome, welcome. Please find your way into the ballroom. Our program will start promptly at 1 p.m. Thank you.
Yes, John. Greetings, sir.
And so even the leaning so behavior
So, this fellow makes So here we go.
okay? It's like it.
Do you need phonetic spellings from me?
It's too much. They've been trying, I've been telling them to please make sure that they know that
In this one, they didn't.
do they not? I think that's for tonight.
Could be. So here. Mike. David. Can you do that one? Do you know how to write his name phonetically?
I think I'm all right. Thanks. Just want to make it's ultimately for tonight.
Sorry to be so rude with all of you. Just trust me.
Please find your way to your seats. Our program will begin very soon. Thank you.
So I didn't realize that actually building this high esteem is recognizing your nearness and having access to God. That's how close you want me to get this thing. All right. So quickly, just so you're aware, don't get phone calls. Okay, 2 board-appointed delegates from Wisconsin. Their names did not get submitted in a timely way because of the human error and new staffer in Wisconsin. We went to the convention and explained that they recommended a seat in the Wisconsin board on minutes of the board meeting where these 2 people were finally advised the delegation during the plenary report that this had happened in their assent.
Thank you. The 121st Anniversary Convention of National Farmers Union is hereby called to order. Good afternoon, everyone. Is it just me, or do you guys get better looking each time we get together? Tell you what, I'm continuing to try to work on my selfie skills, so bear with me here. We're going to take a selfie. Everybody, slick your hair back. 1, 2, 3. One more. Alrighty, thank you. You guys did great. At this time, I would ask you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. We will be led by Mark Gibbons. Mark is the former president of Utah Farmers Union, former president of Dairy Producers of Utah, grew up on a dairy farm in Lewiston, Utah, milking 700 cows and farming 1,200 acres of ground. Utah State FFA Foundation Board member, and currently serving as Utah State Executive Director for the Farm Service Agency at USDA. Mark. You want to come up? Yeah, sorry.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
If you'll continue standing for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Alrighty, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Each year, as we gather as Farmers Union members, we take a moment to pause and to remember those who are not able to join us and who have left since we last met. In the last several years, we've all known too many people dear to us who have departed. We've endured a lot of loss and hardship at times. We've been tested in ways that we may not have thought about. Let us just take a moment now to pause, reflect on those difficult times and our families and those that we love in our communities and country and across the world. Please join me in a moment of silence to remember those we've lost. Thank you for your reflections. Here's a quick note. Before we go further into the convention proceedings, the Policy Committee is available to hear delegates' proposals for changes to the NFU policy document. The committee is meeting upstairs from 1 to 3 p.m. today in Waterfront A/B rooms. You can please sign up outside the room. At this point, let me let the convention body know that Chris Valheim will serve as our convention parliamentarian. Chris is a high school agriculture instructor in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, and a graduate of UW River Falls. He is a Wisconsin Farmers Union member and was a participant in the Farmers Union youth education programs. He has served as parliamentarian at Wisconsin Farmers Union conventions for the last 10 years. And I also have a note here that he's been known to play the banjo. At this point, let me introduce somebody who to this body really doesn't need much of an introduction. Dave Velde is the NFU Chief Counsel. He previously served in a number of capacities, including Deputy Secretary of Agriculture in Minnesota. He is married to Brenda Velde and has 2 children. Dave.
Well, thank you, Rob. At this point in the schedule, we have the bylaws amendment process before us. The Executive Committee of the National Farmers Union serves as the Bylaws Committee. They met on several occasions during the last year, and I am here to report that they have no recommended changes to the bylaws to be considered this year. Please note for future reference that last year we did change the notice period requiring that any proposed change to be considered at any convention must be presented to the national organization no later than 9 days before consideration is to be held on them. But we have none this year, and so there is no further business to come before this body with respect to our bylaws. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dave. And please join me in thanking the 7 members of the Credentials and Rules Committee for this year. Eric Sommerfeld, Montana; Mary Casaway, New England; Brandy Huff, Arkansas; Kaya Medeiros, Hawaii; Roger Wise, Ohio; Dennis Kellogg, Michigan; and Ryan Plemons from Oklahoma. I now call upon Mary Casaway, the Chair of Rules and Credentials Committee, for their preliminary report.
I am not Mary. There's really 2 parts to this report at this time. One is we have always adopted a set of rules that supplement Robert's Rules of Order and how we govern ourselves in the proceeding. You should have received, as you entered the hall this afternoon, or earlier in your packets, a copy of the report from the Rules Committee as to those documents. Do you have them? Did you receive them? They have them in the back? Well, if they're in the back, get them distributed, please, to the delegates so that they can review them. I will tell you as they're being distributed that these are the same as we have used in the past in a non-election year. It identifies the motions that are to be allowed when a matter is before the body. It describes the duration of speaking and the order of presentation. It describes the method by which amendments to policy can be presented to the body. And as to that point, if you are considering presenting something new or significant in scope, please make sure you present yourselves to the policy committee so that they may opine on your proposed change and comply, and thus you'd be in compliance with the rules regarding the submission of that amendment to the policy committee. If you are prepared to, the chair would welcome a motion to adopt the rules of this convention as recommended by the Rules Committee. I hear a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of adopting the proposed rules indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those who are opposed say nay. The motion is carried. The second component of this committee's report deals with the preliminary report of the Credentials Committee. Is Jay coming or who's coming? Or do you want me to read? I have here and available for inspection by anyone wishing to see it, a copy of the resolution recommending the rules that you just adopted. And with respect to the preliminary report of the Credentials and Rules Committee, they have met, reviewed the certificates, and determined that in accordance with Article 9, Section F of the Charter and Bylaws of the Farmers Educational and Cooperative Union of America, that a quorum exists for the conduct of business for this convention. Also, as a reminder, per Article 9, Section C, delegates must be registered by noon Monday next, March 6th. Signed this day, March 5, by the members of the committee. I also want to advise the body in this preliminary report that we were made aware of a circumstance that required the consideration of the Credentials Committee as to the seating of 2 delegates from Wisconsin. As many of you know, our bylaws provide that 2 members of the governing board of each state charter division may also serve as delegates to this convention. When completing the registration form by a new person assigned that task in Wisconsin, they neglected to include in the list the 2 people selected by the board members for that purpose, and only included those that were elected at their convention to be delegates. The state delegation from Wisconsin has provided evidence in the form of minutes indicating that the board did meet, did identify 2 people to serve as delegates, and that, in fact, did occur. And so I'm asking that, and the committee recommends that, we proceed with the seating of these 2 delegates based on the fact that we have evidence of their election, and number 2, recognizing that it was simply a human error. I would first welcome a motion to adopt the preliminary report. I see a motion and a second. Now discussion as to the report itself or my commentary as to the circumstance in Wisconsin. Any discussion? It's hard for me to see hands or people with the lights here. I see somebody standing, yes. Well, Darren, I think you're going to owe one there, yeah. Seeing no one else arising, all in favor of adopting the preliminary report establishing a quorum to do business with the noted issue of resolving the Wisconsin seating of all delegates, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those who are opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Thank you all.
All righty, thank you, Dave. Now I'll welcome Darren Von Ruden for the Secretary's report and approval of the 2022 convention minutes. Darren, a third-generation dairy farmer in Vernon County, Wisconsin, and Wisconsin Farmers Union's president, is a lifelong Farmers Union member and committed leader in our organization. Please note that the minutes have been printed and distributed. Additional copies are available in the back of the room.
We're good, Rob. Thanks, Rob. For the Secretary's report, the first issue is approving the minutes from our last national convention. Is there a motion to do so? Is there a second? Motion and second. Is there any discussion, additions, or corrections? Not seeing any. All of those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, saying no. Motion carries. Probably the only other thing I want to report on is that membership this year is up by a little over 8,000 members across the states, which is good news. That means we're going right. And as part of the Secretary's duties, we're supposed to do audits of states on a regular basis. And this year we have, we're towards the end of the process of doing an audit of Oklahoma and Minnesota. So hopefully before spring field work starts, we can get that done. But that concludes the Secretary's report.
Right, at this point, I'd like to introduce Doug Slomke for the Treasurer's Report. Doug is a fourth-generation crop and cattle producer from Gandhi, South Dakota. He has been president of South Dakota Farmers Union since 2005 and currently serves as treasurer of National Farmers Union.
Thanks, Rob. I guess I'd like to introduce Renee McCann to present our financial report.
Thank you. Thank you, Treasurer Slomke. Let me share my screen. Let me make this good. Let me see it. I need help sharing my screen, I do believe.
And we got IT to help her get her screen shared.
I will call.
We can do that.
Okay, it is going to let me now.
All right.
Okay, great. Okay, one moment. So are you seeing the PowerPoint slide?
No. Not yet.
Okay. Okay, you should be seeing that now, correct?
There we go.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry about that little difficulty, but I am Renee, and I will be reviewing National Farmers Union 2022 year-end financial data, and so we have about 9 slides that we will go through today. So this slide it's just sort of an overview of what we will be doing. The presentation uses 2022 numbers that management has created, and they're pre-audit. We expect the 2022 audited financials to be presented to National Farmers Union Board of Directors at their summer meeting later this year. However, management has included the 2021 audited financial statements in the 2022 annual report, and you can find printed copies at the registration desk. And this is an overview of the relationship between the entities. National Farmers Union and the related entities are listed below. You can see that National Educational and Cooperative Union of America is at the top, and then there are three other entities: National Farmers Union Foundation, National Farmers Union Service Association, and National Farmers Union PAC. And the financials that you're going to look at are consolidated, and they represent the activity across all entities. Here you will see a slide about the net assets. And for NFU and the related entities, the net assets were around 27.5 million at the end of 2022. And as you can see from the pie chart, nearly 80% of those assets were owned by the National Farmers Union, and NFUSA had approximately 20%. And then you will see some small slivers that represent National Farmers Union Foundation and PAC, and they have very few assets. Okay, next we'll look at the assets. The total assets across the organizations were around 31 million at the end of 2022. The majority of this amount represents investments, and as you all probably know, the investments are managed by UBS under an investment policy and portfolio that the National Farmers Union Board oversees and monitors. And the property and equipment you will see on the slide at 8.5%, that represents an interest in National Farmers Union Washington, D.C. office lease. This slide, whoops, let me get back, sorry. This slide shows the history of National Farmers Union net assets since 2008. As many of you know, the equity markets have suffered in the past year, which affects the value of National Farmers Union investments assets. But we expect to see fluctuations year over year, but the long-term trend is what we monitor and we like to see grow. The operating revenue streams are on this slide. The revenue for 2022 was about 4.2 million. The use of name fees and commissions is revenue that NFU and NFUSA receive in conjunction with the insurance relationships. Membership dues are paid by members to the states, and then a small portion of that is paid and remitted to National Farmers Union. Contribution and grants received were mostly by National Farmers Union Foundation from private and government sources. Okay, this slide shows where National Farmers Union's expenses fall by department. The total expenses were about $5 million. The largest was the organization's government relations work. And this slide shows how National Farmers Union funds the organizational expenses. The majority of the expenses are covered by the operational revenue that we just reviewed in previous slides. However, National Farmers Union does plan on operating at a deficit, and the board approves a responsible use of the investment portfolio to cover differences between revenue and expenses. And if we look at the light green bar, if we keep that at a sustainable level, the organization's investment will continue to grow even if some of the funds are used for the expenses year to year. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, you can direct those to National Farmers Union management, who will be happy to take them, and we can make time available, or we could answer in written correspondence if needed. So I'm so sorry I cannot be there in person, but I hope you guys have a great conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Renee. I might add that even though our investments took quite a hit, just like everyone else's did this year, Rob and his staff and the board have done a wonderful job keeping everything under budget, expenses under budget, and even the income we kept above budget. So commend Rob and the staff and the board for their work there. With that, is there a motion to accept their treasury report? Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. Thank you.
Alrighty. Now with hearing those reports, it's time to turn some educational opportunities here and get to hear from some really key speakers. I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce our first guest speaker of the convention, and the first of three speakers highlighting the work of our Fairness for Farmers campaign, which you will hear more about even over the course of the entire convention. The Fairness for Farmers campaign is bringing attention to the need for stronger legislation and enforcement of laws that promote competition in our economy. NFU is currently a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the four largest beef packers for conspiring to suppress the price of cattle and increase the price of beef. Thomas Enlund, partner at Robbins Kaplan LLP, is the lead attorney in the case and works on complex business disputes, including antitrust claims, in a wide range of jurisdictions. From his vantage point as litigator in this important case, Tom has a unique perspective on how legal actions can advance the goals of NFU's Fairness for Farmers campaign. Tom.
Thank you for that nice introduction, Rob. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the invitation to come speak to you folks today about these important issues. You heard a little bit about my background. I'm a partner in the firm of Robbins Kaplan in Minneapolis. I've been in Minneapolis for the last 40 years, but I do come from Rapid City, South Dakota. So I'm a West River boy from out there. My mother came from Big Timber, Montana. I had a grandfather that had a cattle operation out there. My dad grew up on a farm in Madison, Minnesota, with a whole bunch of other Norwegians. So I kind of broke the mold, went to law school. I really wanted to do the cattle operation in Montana, but my grandma wouldn't let me. She said, no, I'm getting rid of that. And I said, why? And she asked me, why do you want to work out here and do all this hard work? It's a tough way to go. And I said, well, it's so beautiful out here. And she said, you can't eat the scenery. And I've never forgotten about that, but I do have a bit of regret because I would have liked to try. But anyway, so that's a little my story. For the majority of my career, I have been doing business litigation with a concentration in antitrust work. And by that, I have done some defense work, but primarily I do plaintiff's work. Our firm, in our plaintiff capacity, in our plaintiff practice, goes after big business or other concentrated businesses that through collusion or simple market power are able to move markets in an unfair way. Obviously, many in this room are familiar with that, with all of the various protein cases, including the cattle case, farm inputs, agricultural inputs, machinery, and the like. This is actually my first case dealing with agriculture. The partner I work with did the vitamins case years ago, but I'm very familiar with the concepts and the case. I've spent years fighting Visa and MasterCard relating to payment card litigation. Again, a concentrated industry where you have very few pipelines that can control pricing in a setting that doesn't always have transparency for the person using the product. So, as I said, this case is a pretty familiar story, right? It's all about concentration. It is the cattle and beef antitrust litigation. And who we are attacking are the four largest beef packing companies in the United States that control 85 to 90% of the slaughter volume, the annual cattle slaughter volume. It's your typical hourglass, right? You have the upper side of the choke point, you got the lower side. We're concentrating on the seller side, upper side. Now this case has several class actions that have all been consolidated in front of Judge Thunheim in Minnesota. There are three classes on the downstream side. The beef part of the litigation representing consumers who are indirect purchasers of beef, and also direct purchasers such as wholesalers or other large operations. So what are we essentially alleging? We're alleging that those four large packers, through their power, use that market power to unlawfully agree to reduce their slaughter volumes in order to drive down cattle prices. Okay? Sounds easy. Concentration's always an issue. And it has been for some time in this industry. But in our view, in 2015, they really successfully broke the market. And they broke the market, in essence, by agreeing to chase high margins instead of competing against each other for cattle. They drove down the slaughter volumes. Are we getting an echo? Okay. It slowed down the slaughter volumes. I couldn't decide which one to be on, so I chose the middle. Okay? They reduced the slaughter volumes to drive this engine. In 2015, they really broke the market. The case is supported by the data that we're seeing. USDA reported data, the company's annual quarterly slaughter volumes, and sales data from members of the class, cattle producers, that we've been able to accumulate. And what it shows is really stark data. Starting in 2015 through our alleged class period in 2020, there were double-digit decreases in the slaughter volume by the four large packing companies, while the independent packers, their slaughter volume was going up by similar amounts upwards. So what you had was the big four willing to cede market power to the independents in order to drive the margin that they wanted. And why is that important? Well, concentration alone isn't necessarily a violation of the antitrust laws. And having concentration through a natural occurrence in the market isn't itself bad. But when you agree to do it in order to get an unfair outcome to the sellers or the beef buyers on the downstream side, that is a problem. We have evidence, direct testimony evidence, that there was an agreement between the four large packers to reduce the slaughter at the times and places where they were facing stronger cattle prices. Remember, before 2005, the herd was rebuilding after a drought. There was a prediction for fairly strong prices for the foreseeable future, but that didn't take place. The prices plummeted. So, as I said, this is corroborated by witness testimony. The data itself is stark. We're in the process of gathering discovery that I'm really not at liberty to discuss publicly because it's all protected by a protective order. But we're going through that process. We have survived the initial motions in the case where the defendants say, this is just supply and demand. This is just the laws of economics. We are simply acting in our own independent economic self-interest in response to common stimuli. How do you like that? All right? That's the legal justification for the actions. It's basically supply and demand. But I think the evidence is showing that they're acting in a concerted fashion to drive a certain outcome. The margins from 2015 onward, the meat margin that the packing companies are enjoying is just off the charts. It doesn't take anybody with any sophisticated knowledge of antitrust law or even knowledge of this particular market, as all of you are quite familiar with. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but when you see margins of just huge hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and you have cattle producers that are barely making any money or losing money per head, while the packers are making hundreds of dollars per head or over $1,000 worth of margin, something's broken, okay? So that's what my firm does. We take a look at that stuff and go after it. Now, the choke point from market power is only part of the story, and the agreement to suppress the slaughter and therefore the prices is only part of the problem. And this is where it dovetails nicely with the Fairness of Farmers Initiative and all of the important work that the National Farmers Union does. The other problem is that all of the big four cattle packers have agreed to a set of collective pricing, purchasing, buying practices that just adds rocket fuel to their ability to control the capacity. So what better thing than being able to limit your capacity artificially, to always stay out in front of the cattle supply and manage it either through seasonality or otherwise, but to be able to exacerbate the result and jack up these margins through your buying practices. And specifically what we're seeing is the push towards AMA, the alternative marketing arrangements, formula contracts and the like. Why is that important? Well, you're creating a huge part of the cattle buying piece for them into these alternative contracts, while you are thinning the cash market for cattle. And when you have a situation like that, that puts you in a position to be able to better manipulate the outcome. Because after all, the cash market is setting the benchmark for this pricing. So how do they manipulate the cash market? Well, goal one is to thin it so you don't have as much cash cattle trade. But you also do things like collusively bidding through a queuing convention that's antiquated and is kind of a perverse right of first refusal that turns into a game of Russian roulette for the producer that's holding on to a perishable product. So you do things like narrow the trading window, in which you will offer oftentimes the first and only bid among the four. You'll see field buyers riding together. There's lot of communication between field buyers. There we have direct testimony from witnesses that have worked at or managed feedlots where there is a threat of a group boycott if they try to shop the cattle, even if you could shop the cattle, right? So if you might be getting a bid for 1 week late on a Friday afternoon, you have no time to actually shop around for another deal. But oh, by the way, if you do, then, we may not be showing up to bid on the cattle. So you have threats of group boycotts and the like. We're looking at the other things that some of you may have heard about or experienced, where you have regional hopscotch, where the packers may move from region to region when prices get a little hot and want to suppress the prices. Or another technique that we're looking at is the uneconomic import of foreign cattle. It doesn't make any sense on the economics of the particular trade, but if you're trying to replace cattle either through uneconomic import or through flex because of your vertical arrangements, you can suppress that cash trade, which of course is the benchmark that sets the prices for the vast majority of the cattle purchased. All of these techniques, in our view, are used unlawfully to drive down prices in the very thin cattle market, setting that benchmark. So that's the picture of what the lawsuit is looking at and challenging. The goal of the case is, yes, pressure for reform in the markets, but also compensation to cattle sellers. We challenge the cartel behavior through a private suit, even a massive one like this, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. Lawsuits are lengthy. They take a long time. And this is a particularly complicated one, actually, and even if you're successful, it often results in only partial satisfaction for the victims of the cartel behavior. And that's where the reform of the markets is so important, and the fight back against too much concentration, too much market power, and the work that the National Farmers Union and your allies are doing. It's just absolutely critical. And you can see how it fits hand in glove with the Fairness to Farmers initiative, for example. We want price transparency. So you can fight the thinning of the cash cattle and create more competitive markets. That's a goal that I've read in the literature from this group. You can push to grow competitive options, localized markets, and enforce and encourage that. Advocating for useful and transparent price signals, incredibly important. Country of origin labeling, very important. All of these things limit the ability of the defendants to use the techniques that they're doing with the control over the slaughter, enforcing prices down, along with quite a few tools in the toolbox to manipulate the cash cattle price or the benchmark for most of their needs. So that's very important. Lawsuits can't do that. It's groups like you that are pushing for regulation, congressional reform and the like, with all the activity on the Hill, and liaising with enforcement agencies is absolutely critical. So that's a summary of what we're doing in this case, how it fits with the Fairness to Farmers initiative. Again, I thank you for inviting me to join you. I will be here later. I'm going to join you at the banquet tonight. If anybody wants to chat and talk about this case, I'd be happy to do so. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, thanks so much, Tom. And hopefully, most of you have seen some of the materials around Fairness for Farmers. Hopefully, you've seen some of the social media messages on this. Maybe you've even heard radio ads. Again, we'll be talking more about a lot of the different elements around Fairness for Farmers and the work that we're doing to bring attention to this monopolization, if you will, in many parts of agriculture, and what can be done to reverse some of the damage there, mitigate some of the challenges, and hopefully also build more resilience and more opportunities in the marketplace. Maybe you don't raise cattle. Maybe you're not familiar with cattle markets. But many of the themes that are happening in that sector are happening and occurring across a lot of different pieces of agriculture. And so listen to the themes. Look at your own marketplace. Maybe you already have found local opportunities. What challenges are there? Are there monopolies that are limiting those opportunities for local and regional processing or local regional markets to sell into? If you have found successful markets and you have plenty of options, think about why that's important to you and what that value is. And much like we've been asking over the last year or so, to ask Farmers Union members to tell your story, to lift up those voices so that we can hear the good, the bad, and the ugly about all of these different conditions out there. We would invite you during this convention to step in front of the video camera, if you dare, and really just speak from the heart about your own experience. Hopefully, we now understand that each of us have a story to tell. Each of us have something to contribute to this, and I can tell you, as having the privilege to represent your voices in many spaces, I rely so heavily on your personal stories and your personal experiences out there to help drive the message for change and why it's important and what we want to see in the future. So please keep that in mind as we talk through all these different issues around the Fairness for Farmers campaign. Think about what that means in your local space and take a few moments during the course of the convention to share your story. As part of that sharing of the story with the videos, we're also going to invite you to talk about what does it mean to be a Farmers Union member? What does it mean to be a member of this gang of troublemakers that I love so much that are out there fighting for real change that's going to make a real difference for farmers and ranchers and their communities out there. Continuing with this theme around fairness for farmers, we have someone speaking to an issue that we've seen in the news a lot lately, and something that I know many of you are very passionate about: right to repair. Right to repair is an important part of our Fairness for Farmers campaign, and the U.S. Public Interest Research Group is a key ally. NFU and PIRG have partnered on numerous reports and surveys to expose how equipment manufacturers are preventing farmers from fixing their own equipment. So many folks don't even understand that this is a problem. So the consumers are starting to wake up to this as well. It prevents folks from fixing their own equipment, harming their bottom line, and reducing options for independent repair. Kevin O'Reilly with us today is a leader in the right to repair movement. He will now share his perspective on the progress made so far and what it will take to win.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rob. Thanks, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited about the progress that we're making on the Right to Repair campaign. And I'd say, most of all, I'm excited about the partnership between NFU and PIRG that is ultimately going to drive this campaign across the finish line. Before we hop into the issue, I'm going to talk, of course, about the progress we've made, where we're headed, what it's going to take to win. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about my organization, about me, about why you're hearing from this guy in the John Lennon glasses and maybe over manicured beard, who clearly has never farmed a day in his life. So let's start with my org. If we can get this clicker. Is that going? There we go. Look at that. All right, so PIRG stands for the Public Interest Research Group. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan public interest advocacy organization that started back in the late 70s, led by Ralph Nader. And in the decades since, we've expanded to have 20-some state organizations that push for issues around consumer protection, environmental protection, as well as public health and good governance. And over the past 6 years, Right to Repair has been a key part of the mission. So personally, pushing for agricultural right to repair has been a huge priority of mine over my 4 years on the campaign. So one of the things that I've done is research into exactly how manufacturers are engineering modern equipment so that you can't fix it, right? And one of the first reports, what we were able to do, there we go, was also expose how manufacturer commitments to live up to, providing farmers with what they need to fix their own stuff fell short, essentially. Additionally, I've looked into consolidation around dealerships, right? And this is a prime example of Rob talking about sharing your stories. We were hearing from farmers across the country about how it used to be that they had 4 different mom and pop dealerships that they were able to turn to. So there was that competition there, right? But nowadays, that's just simply not the fact. And what we found in our research was that John Deere, which is by far the most consolidated when it comes to dealerships, right? They've got one dealership chain for every 12,018 U.S. farms and every 5.3 million acres of U.S. farmland. So as you can see here, if we pass Right to Repair, that means alone that other dealerships, Kubota, Case IH, can service each other's equipment. And right there, without the self-repair, you've got more options. But I want to zoom out for a second also. As you might know, Right to Repair is an issue that spans across device types, right? This is something that, whether it's a tablet, a tractor, or even life-saving medical equipment, chances are, if there's a chip in it, the manufacturer is trying to prevent you from fixing your stuff. And in many ways, it's part of a broader trend, right? It used to be that we valued things, right? We would fix them when they break. We'd refurbish them when they needed it, right? When they were getting old. We'd repurpose them when they were no longer fulfilling their original use. And only when all of those options were exhausted would we throw something away. Now, I want to give credit where credit's due. I feel like farmers still really embody these principles. So by a show of hands, who has a piece of equipment that's been in your family or operation for more than a generation? Look at that. Well, to the fixers, we love you. Good stuff. Unfortunately, that's just not the case for many other consumers and device types, right? We've been trained to toss stuff as soon as something goes wrong, whether, you crack your phone screen, great time for an upgrade. Battery on your earbuds isn't lasting as long, go get a new pair. But ultimately, this planned or premature obsolescence, right, this is something that manufacturers have been driving because they can sell more stuff, their bottom lines look better. But in the process, right, it's costing us money, it is hurting the environment in really significant ways. So, whether on the environmental side, throughout a product's lifespan, from mining to manufacture to disposal, it has really big impacts. And it also just costs consumers money. We did a report a few years back that found that families could save combined $40 billion if they were able to, fix rather than replace some common household electronics. We've actually got a report coming out later this month on the cost impact of repair restrictions in the agricultural space. Really looking forward to sharing that information with y'all. But finally, repair restrictions just run directly in the face of what it means to be an American, right? When you buy something, you should be able to do what you want with it. When something breaks, we should fix it. And there's just no way that a manufacturer should be able to tell me that I can't fix my stuff, right? Or that I can't hire somebody to fix it for me simply because they don't have the manufacturer's logo on their shirt or on their hat. That's not fair, and that's why with Right to Repair, we're pushing to make sure that independent fixers of all kinds can get access to the parts, tools, and information they need to fix their stuff when it breaks. And, I think that's why it's a part of NFU's Fairness for Farmers initiative, and I'm really glad that it is. Okay, enough about electronics. Thanks for humoring me. Let's get to the good stuff, Right to Repair for agricultural equipment. When it comes to strategy, right, the way that we're trying to make sure that you can fix your own equipment has really started in the states. And the reason that we're pushing for change at the state level is because back in 2012, as you might know, the auto industry passed a Right to Repair bill in Massachusetts. And once that happened, all the auto manufacturers came to the bargaining table and signed an agreement that essentially made the Massachusetts law the law of the land. We think we can replicate that progress, right? So if we pass one bill, if we pass 2 or 3 bills, we ramp up the pressure so that manufacturers feel like they'd rather just deal with what we've passed rather than a different law in every single state. And so we've pushed really hard at the state level. In the decades since Massachusetts passed the car Right to Repair bill, 44 different states have considered some sort of Right to Repair legislation. And in the process, we've also elevated the issue at the federal level, right? So we've got a list of a number of different things that have happened here. We had 3 bills last Congress. We're predicting that we'll see some again in this new Congress. The Farmers Union, NFU, as well as a number of state Farmers Union signed on to a complaint to the FTC against John Deere for their repair restrictions. PIRG, as well as Repair.org and iFixit, who are a couple other key allies in the Right to Repair campaign, were also part of that, as well as Farm Action. And then, Willie Cade, the EPA's least favorite troublemaker, has been pushing them to make some change. And then, these 16 class action lawsuits, these are not things that have come from NFU or PERG action, but the FTC complaint that we filed was the basis for those lawsuits. So we're excited and we're watching how those develop. And I'm excited to hear from the Department of Justice here in a minute about their analysis of the case. There was, of course, John Deere's Memorandum of Understanding that was signed earlier in January. And it's been clear from listening to folks like yourselves that it's not good enough, right? It's not actually making a change. And Willie Cade of Repair.org and I actually went out and had the opportunity to compare Customer Service Advisor, the repair software that they make publicly available for sale, to the dealer level tools. What was clear is that farmers don't have access to all the diagnostic, all the troubleshooting information that they need through these tools. And they also can't install the software necessary to authorize a repair at the end of the process, right? So fact of the matter is Customer Service Advisor is not getting the job done. And, even if this MOU might have been an attempt to take the wind out of Right to Repair's sails, it's very clear it has not been successful in doing so. I would say we are seeing more momentum for this issue than we ever have before, right? So on this map, as you can see, there's 13 states right now considering Right to Repair legislation. More important than the number, I think the number is significant, but is the progress that these bills are making. So, we are getting deeper into the legislative session, and we're getting closer to actually passing these bills. So, Colorado is an incredibly exciting state. So, Dan Waldvogel, as well as Tyler Garrett and the team at Rocky Mountain Farmers Union have been really leading the way, pushing this bill, which passed through the House. It's now slated for a hearing this week, and hopefully we'll get that and go to the Senate floor. So really great work happening there. In addition to that, Minnesota is another place where we're seeing some serious progress. So Stu Laurie, is Stu here? Yeah, but yay, that's what I'm saying. Stu Laurie and Minnesota Farmers Union have done an incredible job, for one, organizing their own members, but also helping to organize one of the strongest cross-industry in-state coalitions that we see anywhere. And that's a big reason why the bill on the House side has made it through both committees. Unfortunately, the knuckleheads in the Senate committee tried to strip ag, but I don't think we're going to let that stand. It's not over yet, and I know if Stu has anything to say about it, it's definitely not over yet. But it's also, lots happening this year, but I think it's also important to recognize that, this isn't flash pan success, right? This is something that a lot of people in this room have been doing a lot of work for over the years. So, for example, last year, John Hanson in Nebraska helped to drive a bill that came as close as we've ever been to a governor's desk. As John likes to say, he thought they were going to have to expand the Capitol Rotunda because of all the Deere lobbyists that were on site. But nonetheless, a lot of good work happening there. And then, of course, right, the Agricultural Right to Repair bill introduced by Senator Tester from Montana. That's a big credit to Walter Schweitzer. Walter, what is it that you like to say about Senator Tester?
That he was my butcher before he was my senator.
Butcher before his senator. I mean, can you find a better congressional champ than that? So we're going to keep pushing. We're not there yet. There's a lot of exciting progress, but we're going to make sure that we get this across the finish line, and there's work that all of you can do to help make that happen. So for one, go and record your story. If you have dealt with repair restrictions, tell us what happened, how long it took. Tell us the impact to your crop, and also how it made you feel, right? The powerless feel that comes from monopoly control can be incredibly powerful with legislators and decision makers. In addition to that, right, we've done a lot of work. Even if you you don't have a state bill in your state, again, we're predicting that there will be congressional bills on this issue. So start organizing your members. survey them. We have some samples that you can use to get an understanding of how this impacts them, as well as identifying folks for lobby meetings. And then also the last thing I would say is start having conversations with other in the ag committee in your state or community in your state. I know the Rocky Mountains Farmers Union has done a great job bringing commodity groups on board, and that's a big reason that bill has moved so quickly. So to close, we need to get right to repair done. It's ridiculous that you can't fix your own equipment. I'm encouraged by the work that we've done and the progress we've made, but really it's so important, and thank you, Rob, for your leadership on this issue. We're not where we are without you all, without National Farmers Union, without the State Farmers Union. So looking forward to working with you to get this across the finish line.
Alrighty, thanks so much, Kevin. And obviously, we have power when we work together. We have even more power when we reach out to those allies and we build those coalitions, and we can really make a big difference in affecting positive change. At this point, it is my honor to introduce our next speaker. Michael Kaitis is the Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Antitrust Division at the U.S. Department of Justice. Several of us had a chance to meet with him, along with the Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust, Jonathan Cantor, during the NFU fly-in. Previously, Michael was the Director for Markets and Competition Policy at the Washington Center for Equitable Growth. Before that, he worked as Antitrust Counsel for Minnesota's own Senator Amy Klobuchar. He previously spent 20 years investigating antitrust actions as an attorney at the Federal Trade Commission and as a graduate of Yale University and the University of Wisconsin Law School. Michael Kaitis.
So is this the one I'm talking to? Yes. It should really be on the left, shouldn't it? Good afternoon, everyone. To say, when I was excited to come here, nobody told me I would be opening for Speaker Pelosi, so I'm a little nervous. But really, I'm honored to be here today. And it's encouraging to see so many familiar faces among the producers and operators out there. Thank you for all the work you do. And let's be clear, you're the ones feeding the country, so it's important work. And a special thank you to Rob, Aaron, and the whole NFU team for organizing this convention. Engaging with America's farmers is core to what we do at the Antitrust Division. Just last fall, as Rob just mentioned, we met with a whole group of you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, the Pelosi thing wasn't enough of a challenge. And to our knowledge, this meeting was the first of its kind at the Antitrust Division leadership, including the Assistant Attorney General, Jonathan Cantor, and the Principal Deputy, Doha Mekki. We spent over an hour listening and learning from your members, and it had an impact. And that conversation has led to more engagement, and my appearance here today is really just one example of that. It's also shown a light on new and old issues in agriculture and competition, and informed some of my own and our division's thinking on the subject. And I want to share the fruits of that thinking and our recent work in that area. But first, some background. Before I started at the division, Jonathan Cantor asked me, "What do you want to work on?" You might have expected me to say healthcare, spent 20 years doing that, high tech, stuff that gets in the media. But I had a different idea. My answer was simple: agriculture. I told him, I want to work on agriculture and antitrust. And that choice was easy for me. Agriculture and family farming are the backbone of our economy. Although I live in D.C., I'm proud to call Wisconsin home. I mean, who wouldn't choose the Packers over the Redskins or the Commanders? But farming is central to my state's way of life.
And until recently, dairy farmers across the state of Wisconsin supported not generations of families, but nearly countless small and mid-sized communities be prosperous and successful. As all of you know, right, every state's economy depends on agriculture. Unfortunately for me, most Americans would get by just fine if they never had to see a lawyer, ever, in their whole life. But, as the old saying goes, everyone needs a farmer 3 times a day. As FDR put it, prosperous farmers means more employment, more prosperity for the workers and businessmen of every industrial area in the whole country. And let's be clear, competition policy historically has played a critical role in promoting that type of prosperity. More than a century ago, farmers were fed up. Monopolies were pressing on them from all sides. So, the farmers stood up, joined together, fought back, and eventually were critical to securing major legislation such as the Sherman Act and the Packers and Stockyards Act, creating a competitive, thriving industry that benefited not just the large corporations, but the people who do the work. But for rural America, the promise of prosperity is now elusive. Across the country, family farms are disappearing. I know this firsthand. In 2018, Wisconsin was losing, on average, almost 2 dairy farms a day. And it's not just Wisconsin. Between 2011 and 2018, 100,000 farms were disappeared. Once thriving small towns are shuttered and silent, the opioid crisis has ripped through rural America, and phrases like the hollowing out of middle America and the politics of despair are all too commonplace. I want to be clear, although the challenges facing rural America go beyond competition or the lack of it, we cannot discount the connection between the two. Family farmers often face monopolies when buying the supplies and equipment they need, and face monopsonies, which is just a complicated term for few buyers, when selling their crops and livestock. The statistics are sobering, but I think they're worth emphasizing. 4 companies now control 85% of the corn seed market. 3 manufacturers control 95% of equipment production and maintenance. 4 companies control over 80% of the beef packing industry, and that list could go on and on. Now, antitrust scholars, eggheads like me, and economists can debate the meaning and implications of consolidation until, pun intended, the cows come home. The speech, not really about that debate, while I do have strong views on it. I want to make a more basic point. Once firms acquire market power, they often exploit it, and that exploitation can violate the antitrust laws. And frankly, the kinds of complaints we're hearing are raise those concerns. And here are a few examples we're hearing. As I will discuss in a moment, there are concerns that poultry processors are depressing wages of their workers and limiting competition for contract growers. We just heard about how there's concerns that the beef packers are distorting the competition in the livestock market. Others worry that seed companies with dominant positions may be using intellectual property to inappropriately forestall competition. We just heard about the issue of right to repair. So let me talk a little bit about recent developments about what we've been doing. And let me start with right to repair. So as we just heard, there are a number of private actions. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Antitrust Division took an important action. We have the ability by Congress, we can file what's called a statement of interest in any case. So in Chicago, there was a right to repair class action. John Deere filed a motion to dismiss, and in February, we filed a statement of interest. And we were pretty clear about what the position of the government of the United States was. Let me just quote from our brief. We said, Deere is wrong. And as Deere's proposed presumption contravenes Supreme Court precedent. That's the United States of America taking a stand about what the law means and what it should mean and who it should protect. This past summer, the division brought suit alleging a wide-ranging agreement among poultry processors, claiming they were suppressing the wages of their workers. According to the complaint, for at least 20 years, poultry processors that dominate local markets across the country and combined employ over 90% of all poultry workers were collaborating on and assisting each other on the type of compensation they were paying their workers. 20 years, 90% of all workers. Ultimately, that conspiracy gave the poultry processors the ability to suppress competition and lower compensation. We filed what's known as a consent. We settled with Cargill, Wayne Farms, and Sanderson. That decree is groundbreaking in a number of ways. First, it requires the processors to pay restitution to the harmed workers. Second, the companies are now subject to an expansive monitor that applies not just to that specific type of action, but any antitrust violations in their poultry processing business. Third, the consent decree provides protection from retaliation against poultry processors and growers who raise concerns about potential antitrust violations. The commitment to antitrust enforcement and promoting competition and protecting American farmers to be successful needs to go beyond the antitrust division. And that spirit is embodied in President Biden's executive order on enhancing competition and the administration's whole of government approach. Let me give you a current example in the poultry industry. It involves chicken growers and the tournament system, which I suspect, unlike most audiences, I don't need to go into detail of how that works. But just to sort of frame the issue, right? We all know chicken growers. We don't call them farmers because they don't own the chickens. They don't buy the feed. They don't control veterinarian services. But they do have to make hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars investment to raise their chickens. And when it gets time to get paid, they don't get a wage. They don't get a wage with bonus. They're put into a tournament system where they're competing against their neighbors. And those who do better get a bonus. Those who do worse get penalized. And small differences in the quality of the chickens or the amount of feed or when it arrives can really be the difference between winning the tournament or literally losing the farm. In the poultry case I discussed above, we also allege that Wayne and Sanderson's tournament systems violated the Packers and Stockyards Act. This act was passed back in 1921 to provide livestock producers a broad range of protections from packers and, as later amended, chicken processors. Under that act, the United States Department of Agriculture can refer violations to the Department of Justice, which then can bring an enforcement action. So we worked with the USDA to identify and pursue these violations. And again, under the settlement, Wayne and Sanderson, now Wayne Sanderson, will stop penalizing their growers and will make clear disclosures so those growers understand the risks they face when they sign a contract and what's really at stake. Now, I don't want anyone here to think that we think we're done in this industry. We still have plenty of work to do. And I can assure you that we will continue to devote ourselves to protecting competition in agriculture. So what does that mean? First, it means we have to be willing to bring tough cases. The case I just discussed is an example of that approach. Many attorneys, I will leave you to guess on which side they're on, in some courts have really interpreted that act too narrowly. But the Antitrust Division has a responsibility, however, to push back on interpretations of the statute that are unduly narrow and allow violations to occur. So we're willing to go even where we face some legal obstacles. We believe the Packers and Stockyard Act that I discussed was the first time the Antitrust Division has used that statute. No one figured out how long that took. Even when the facts are complicating or the law is challenging, we need to and are committed to pursuing meritorious cases. Second, we have to prioritize engagement and keeping our eyes open into the ground. So engagement, that means reaching out and showing up again and again. That's what we've done so far and will continue to do. I'm hoping we're on your dance card for next fall when you come to DC. We've been to events like this convention all over the country, from Nashville to Northern California. We've also hosted numerous groups devoted to greater competition and fairness in agriculture, and look forward to doing more. Third, engagement means dedicated resources and personnel. That's how you know what we're prioritizing. While I can't talk about ongoing investigations, I can say we have a significant number of attorneys and staff that are looking at these issues, from enforcement, filing statements in support of actions we think are meritorious, to policy. In addition, we've dedicated a counsel for agriculture at the Antitrust Division. His name's Chan Mazumdar. Now, Chan has decades of experience in the industry, and I know he won't be upset for saying that he is available anytime to take your call or answer an email if you have questions, concerns, or potential complaints. Chan is an evidence of our deep commitment to law enforcement in this area. Finally, we are committed to listening and learning. As you all know, you are the ones who understand the markets and have an encyclopedic, butchered that word, knowledge. And the best way for us to learn about competition and fairness across agricultural markets is talk to the people who are doing the job. To that end, we've set up a way for our whole division to communicate with you. It's called the Farmer Fairness Portal. We did that with the USDA. The portal, which can be found on the USDA website, allows you to send tips or report violations of the Packers and Stockyards Act or other statutes. You can do so that's two in a page. You can do so confidentially and privately. I really think I should have just gone with privately there. With no fear of retaliation. And spread the word about it. The portal's not an end in itself, though. It's another step in this conversation. It's another example of our approach at the division, engaging and listening to those who matter. In closing, I've talked about what we have done, but let's be clear. To paraphrase Winston Churchill, what we have done is not the end. It's not the beginning of the end. It's not even the end of the beginning. It's really just the beginning of the beginning. We are committed to forcing the law, and protecting competition in agriculture is at the top of our priority list, as I know it is for each of you. Thank you for your time.
Wasn't that refreshing? A refreshing change. How many here in the room had the opportunity to sit in that meeting with DOJ during fly-in? I know we have several in here who were in that meeting. Let me tell you just a little bit about that meeting going into it. First of all, we made a very conscious decision for this past year's fly-in to not only reach out to USDA and to our members of Congress, but to also look to those other parts of government that really impact farmers and ranchers every day. So that was Federal Trade Commission, that was Department of Justice Antitrust Division, it was the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, it was the Surface Transportation Board, and a number of other agencies where we have really important, essential issues that impact farmers and ranchers. For this meeting that we were able to secure with the Antitrust Division, we were told how many folks we could bring in there, which was more than I thought was going to be possible. So that was a good sign. But we were told something that's really typical in Washington for these kinds of meetings, right? We were told that there will be, essential people in the room, decision makers, staff supporting this, but that the principal in the meeting the Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust, Jonathan Cantor, was only going to be able to spend about 5 minutes in the room. He would listen, he would be, it was a nice gesture, right? You get that sometimes in DC. Come in, you might get the member of Congress for just a few minutes, and then you talk to the folks who help support them. What was really incredible was we got into this meeting. We were also told that the meeting couldn't go any longer than 30 minutes total. We get 5 minutes with the Assistant Attorney General, and for a total of 30 minutes. As the Deputy Assistant Attorney General just told you, that meeting went well over an hour. The Assistant Attorney General, Jonathan Cantor, stayed for the entire time, and he led the questioning. There were so many things and so many different topics that they wanted to cover, and they wanted to hear everybody's stories, everybody's input on those issues. And we knew leaving there that was not, this was just kind of characterized, the end of that conversation, but really just the beginning of it. And they have reached out several times since to make sure that we can connect folks up with them. We're thrilled to have them here today, and we know that they will continue to be this voice. It makes a difference when you have a president in the White House who tells all of the agencies across government that competition and fairness across the economy is a priority for this administration. That trickles down through each of those at Department of Justice, at Federal Trade Commission, at USDA. We've had some talk in recent years with different administrations who gave a little bit of talk to these important issues, who listened a little bit, but I felt like, maybe some of you felt the same way, that some of those conversations went down on a notepad and probably got put into a filing cabinet. We have a different approach here this time. And I would argue that this focus on competition is something we haven't seen since the days of Teddy Roosevelt from any administration. I often talk, as we looked at this question of competition in the marketplace, and we look at the consolidation that has occurred over the last several decades, really since the 80s, that we've had the wrong kind of bipartisanship. We want people working together for the good. But unfortunately, what we've seen since the 80s, Republican administration, Democratic administration, and repeated, is just a lack of oversight, a lack of enforcement of the laws on the books to enforce antitrust. And so you've seen this spiraling of competition over the years. But now we have a difference. And we have somebody who is taking a big look at this, bringing focus and attention to it, and it's our perfect opportunity to make sure that we're lifting up our voice on these important issues. At this point, we are ready for a break. I have been instructed to tell everyone to please be back in your seats at 2:40 for our next speaker. All righty? Enjoy your break.
This is your 5-minute warning. Please return to your seats. Our program will begin promptly at 2:45. Thank you. Please return to your seats. Our program will begin shortly. Thank you. Please find your way to your seats. We're trying to start at 2:45. Thank you. please find your way to your seats. We're beginning very soon. Thank you.
Next, it is my deep honor and no secret at this point to introduce a great friend to Farmers Union, Speaker Emerita of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. She has been a driving force behind recent farm bills, and indeed was the reason that some of those farm bills actually made it across the finish line. She's a well-known advocate for empowering the next generation of women and young leaders. And we are absolutely delighted to be here in her district. Please help me once again in welcoming Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It's lovely to see you all. It's my honor to welcome you to San Francisco. I'm so delighted that you are having your 121st celebratory convention of the National Farmers Union. I've been to some, not all, of the conventions that you have had, some by Zoom. And I remember seeing some of you in Florida when we had a wonderful meeting. And it was so productive that we decided to do some dancing to celebrate it. Was anybody there dancing in Florida for that? Don't tell anybody I said it about the dancing. But the thing is I think you can never dance too much. I tell the members, recreate and recreate are the same word. You must recreate so that you recreate yourself for the work ahead. So in that spirit, I hope you enjoy your visit to San Francisco, and I know it will be very productive. Rob LaRue I've known for a while when he was working on Capitol Hill, and as he indicated, we did some work together on authorization of farm bills under leadership of our then chairman, Colin Peterson, whose regards I bring to you. I spoke to him this morning, told him I was going to be seeing all of you. Of course, he was full of advice and guidance, but I only have 3 to 5 minutes, so I won't go into all of that. When I first arrived here at the hotel, I was greeted by the young people. I mean, it's just the next generation of advocates, the young people. So happy to see such a presence of young people here. And then I was welcomed by the women farmers, and let's hear it for the women farmers as well. As we celebrate this meeting, and obviously it's a work meeting to prepare for many things, including the reauthorization of the Farm Bill that is coming up, we celebrate the magnificent leadership of the National Farmers Union. The turn of the 20th century, more than 121 years ago, 10 family farmers, you know this story so well, but just let's savor it. 10 family farmers came together with a single mission to improve the lives of farmers, producers, ranchers, and growers. And ever since, the National Farmers Union has been a relentless champion for farm country, uniting the men and women who help put food on the tables across the country, lunches into our schools. Just such a magnificent asset to America. And in a bipartisan way, when you think about McGovern, Dole McGovern, whichever way you want to say it, two champions of farm country, but also for sustenance in America. So we're deeply grateful to you for all that you're doing, for coalition building and ensuring that voices of farmers from every background across America are heard in Washington, D.C. House Democrats are so proud of our partnership with the National Farmers Union, and together we've forged some important progress. I understand that later, I hope I'm not giving away the surprise, you will be hearing from the President of the United States, Joe Biden, who has been such a champion for justice in farm country, and not only about issues that are strictly agriculture, but directly related, whether we're talking about broadband or road building or education, health care, you name it. He has, under Mr. Bill Sachs' leadership, our Secretary of Agriculture, really been right in the forefront of understanding and trying and addressing the concerns. But he'll speak for himself on that later. But we're very proud of how he has injected the concerns of farm country into all the legislation. Our latest farm bills, getting to the point, in 2018, we believe delivered bold, forward-thinking investments in rural communities, from research to organic and specialty crops, to conservation, to broadband expansion, and more, some of which I mentioned. None of that would have been possible without your intellectual resource you all are and the input that you gave us. And it provided deeply needed certainty amid the, in a won't go into what happened with the previous president, but trade wars that were out there. Now we prepare to negotiate again the Farm Bill, the 2023 Farm Bill. As you know, the Farm Bill expires the end of September. In the next 6 months, we want to do our very best work listening to what you have to say as to how we should proceed. We're fully committed to standing with you to fight for farmers. I talk about it in three things, 3 C's: competition, conservation, and climate. And having visited some of your farms, you know more than we do on these subjects. We have a lot to learn from you, to be current, to be of the future, to be anticipating what comes next. We're talking about precision farming. We're talking about so many things that you know on the day-to-day. So know your power in all of this, because we can work with you and do our maneuvering internally, but the outside mobilization that you bring to this, you're weighing in with members of Congress, you're organizing in your communities to weigh in a very special way, will make a very big difference in the shape of that Farm Bill. We have a large number of new members who all want to be on the Ag Committee, and they're very excited about their role in this next legislation. But the success of it is very important, not only to rural America and to farmers. It's important, as essential as that is, it's important to our whole country. We in California consider ourselves a big farm state. Our agriculture and yours is in large measure responsible for our preeminence in world trade, because food is one of our greatest exports. Agricultural products are greatest exports. So thank you for what you do to keep America strong globally, what you do to keep families sustained at the kitchen table, in classrooms, etc. But I really want to thank you so much for what you do for family farmers, honoring the vision of the founders of the National Farmers Union, to make sure, as I said at the beginning, to make sure that families, really family farms, have the respect, protection, and understanding of the role that you all play in America's future. So in that spirit, I welcome you to San Francisco. I wish you a very productive session. Our hopes are riding on some of what you will be deciding, and we look forward to benefiting from all of that. In that spirit, I welcome you to my city, my district, our state, but I also bring greetings from the Democrats in the Congress of the United States. We look forward to sharing time with you, hearing your ideas, working together for a better future for rural America and for our country. Thank you for your patriotism. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you so much. And let us thank Rob LaRue for his wonderful leadership of the National Farmers Union.